Next, we will have our third symposium titled Towards the Future of Healthcare. But before we start on the symposium, may I remind all of you in the auditorium on the usage of the pigeonhole. Please log on to the auditorium Wi-Fi at Khoo Teck Puat Hospital with the following username and password as indicated on the screen. Once you are logged on, please go on to the website pigeonhole.at and key in the event passcode AHFORUM2014. This will actually allow you to post your questions online for the symposium coming up. Our chairperson for this third symposium, entitled Towards the Future of Healthcare, is Prof. Tavintaran Subramaniam, Senior Consultant in General Medicine. So without further ado, Prof. Tavin, please.
Good morning to all of you. Yeah. So this morning and a little bit into the afternoon, we have 4 eminent speakers, and so a fairly packed program. So I think without much ado, I'll just move on quickly to the program itself on the future of healthcare. And the first part of it, we will be focusing on the residency program, and we have 2 speakers there. And the first speaker is Professor Raja Surya. Professor Raja Surya is a senior consultant in the Department of General Medicine. He is a specialist in internal medicine and endocrinology. He is also, he holds conjunct appointments in the NUS Yong Loo School of Medicine, as well as a professorship with the adjunct professorship with the Duke's NUS. He is a well-known teacher to all of us and for a lot of us. And his contributions in education, medical education, was recognized with the highest award locally, the National Medical Education Excellence Award in Medical Education in the year 2011. Professor Raja is the chairman of the Residency Advisory Committee and also holds chair positions with the Singapore Medical Council's House Officers Training Committee, as well as the Training and Assessment Standards Committee with the Singapore Medical Council for the first year postgraduate years, the House Officers. So without much ado, let us invite Professor Raja to speak on the first talk. Okay, I have to read this title. I think we will give him his, on the residency. It's a very provocative title. Maybe can you help me to read that? How and why we landed up where we are. Sounds like I'm not sure whether we're in a good or bad situation from the way the question is. Please join me to invite Professor Raja.
Thank you very much, Tavin. I put up this introductory slide to tell you the Singapore Residency Training Program is like this slide. The skyline changes. There's an attempt to blend the old with the new. Now, let me just briefly talk about the stakeholders in healthcare. There are different perspectives for different stakeholders. The policy-making bodies, politicians and all included, want to care for all citizens, and this must be cost-effective. The professional associations and the health service organization have another interest, and that is they want independent judgment on the best care. The health insurance companies and the health service organization have another motive, and that is make sure financially they are correct. And the academic institutions have another primary motive, which is to train graduates, give them knowledge, expansion, and excellence, of course. The consumers, the patients, they want accessible, high-quality health service in adequate quantity. So all these stakeholders have a big role in deciding what doctors are produced by a nation. We get the mouse here? Landed up in residency. How did we land up there? We took some steps. It's partly what societal requirements are, what the ministry and its advisors decided, what faculty and academia felt was necessary, what doctors felt was lacking and should be done, and of course, we wanted to introduce a process and structure, and that's how we landed up there. My outline at the top will quickly run through some important aspects. Firstly, particularly for those who are not familiar with the Singapore scene, medical schools, hospitals, house officer demographics, historical perspectives of the past and present junior doctor, a global perspective of change for doctors, residency and the change that swept Singapore in 2010, and a little bit about accreditation and assessment. Medical schools. We have 3 medical schools. The National University of Singapore Yong Lu Lin School produces approximately 260 graduates. We recruit approximately 170 graduates from overseas. Dukes produce about 50 to 60 graduates, and Yong Lu Lin will produce, Lee Kong Chen Medical School, a tie-up between Imperial College and Nanyang Technological University will be an upcoming, they have started their intake of medical students, and they'll be producing graduates too. Now, many years ago when I was a house officer, I was told being a doctor is an uphill climb. You're not careful, you will fall, and we'll put you at sea, you swim ashore. We had very long hours, we had calls, 8 to 10 calls per month, hardly off calls. If at all, we sleep on empty patients' beds. There's no call allowance, no meal allowance. We clerk every new case that comes, and the seniors who clerk our cases are heavenly gifts to us. We learn on the job. There are no specific tutorials, no protected time. A weekend off is a rarity. Currently, the house officer or the first year postgraduate is handheld. A HO is considered an extension of medical school. There is protected time. They have a maximal number of calls. They get off calls, 12 noon, if not earlier. They have call rooms with beds, with telephones, with showers, call allowance, meal allowance, protected time, fixed tutorials, and most must help. Maximal number of patients, less than 15, some even less. And they can go home at 5 p.m. I'm not denigrating this, but I'm just showing you the change that has happened over the years. And why did this change come about? This change came about because of various factors. There is a generational difference. There are new forces in medicine, and the way we respond to these forces of medicine have necessitated all these changes. What are these generational issues? If you look on the top axis, you see the veterans born this year, baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y. So, and they have different aspects and considerations for these. This is a very busy slide, but I just want to highlight what I have put in stars. The Generation Y is entrepreneurial. They are goal-oriented. They have email, they have voicemail, they have SMS, they have Facebook. And they want a work-life balance. It's not wrong, but it's the expectation which has changed. Now, there are new forces in medicine too. What are these new forces? We have exponential knowledge increase. We have information technology. Disease patterns have changed. Healthcare delivery and specialty units have come about. The societal and patient expectations have changed. There are changes in professional roles and boundaries. And the expectations have been different. How did society respond? They respond by providing a new curriculum, new learning situations, new educational strategies, new tools, new curriculum themes. I'll elaborate a little bit more there. New methods of assessment and new support structures. There's a new emphasis on a few things. These include communication skills, ethics and attitude, preparing somebody for practice. You are not dumped in sea and asked to swim ashore. We tell you how to swim. And evidence-based medicine. Now, residency and the change that swept Singapore. There are three major milestones that happened. There was a realization of a problem. There was input sought from stakeholders and expert advice. I've given the years there. And there were implementation of changes. Way back in 2007 to 2008, the Ministry of Health embarked on an in-depth examination of our postgraduate medical training system. And it was noted there's a gradual erosion of the apprenticeship scheme due to service pressures. The existing system of training lacked a structure. That was felt not only by the ministry, it was felt when we interviewed the trainees. I was particularly involved in that as a project undertaken by the ministry where we personally interviewed trainees. In August 2008, the American College of Graduate Medical Education, led by its chairman, Tom Nasca, visited Singapore and met senior management and also visited hospitals. And what I've highlighted in bold, their conclusion was it lacked structure. Example, there was no designated faculty, administration, protected time, consistency was lacking, and no proper feedback, audits, case logs, or formative assessment. So they identified a problem. And this is what residency is all about in summary. It introduces competencies, what we expect our doctors to achieve. And it introduces a structure. When you talk about structure, there are 4 components: system, curriculum, people, and assessment. These are the 6 core competencies that's demanded of doctors. So they must be able to work in the system. They must have good knowledge, care for patients, exhibit professionalism, interpersonal skills. This is structure. In terms of structure, there should be curriculum, assessment, people, designated core staff, and systems. So you must accredit the unit, there must be processes, there must be oversight, structures, and committees. So on the top is the old, on the bottom is the new. Not very different they have merged the house officer with the medical officer, and you get new terminologies. Now, accreditation and distribution. At the Medical Council, we designate number of house staff for different units, and this is based on specialty or discipline, the capacity to train. If you can't train, you don't get house officers. What's your patient load? The more load, you get more house officers. If you have a teaching program, we support you with more doctors. And if you take care of the junior doctors, we support you. And night calls, even if you have very small units, we must make sure we don't overwork you by just going by proportions. Assessment-wise, supervisor rating comes in. There's multi-rater, not only assessed by doctors, but by nursing officers, by registrars, by their fellow house officers. Mini clinical examinations, clinical chart reviews, what they document, what they write, is it legible or not, logbooks, and feedback. there's a chance for the house officer to feedback. So that's in terms of assessment. As usual, when you introduce a new system in place, you get pros and cons. The pros have been there's an increasing involvement in other units, emergency, radiology, anesthesia, where house officers may be posted, especially. Medical education becomes very important for all hospitals. There's a merging, so there's flexibility in calls and the continual review of learning processes. There are also disadvantages. Are we Americanizing medicine? Are we specializing too early? Do our specialists lack experience? Of course, there's too much paperwork, and smaller institutions may get shortchanged. Now, in introducing any change while achieving a goal, you come through a lot of barriers. To tell everyone we have a problem is not easy, and to convince the change is not easy either, but to implement the change becomes more difficult. But somehow we have gone through the first three. The fourth one, to further tweak, is what is beyond. And the question arises, do we have to introduce patient feedback in doctor assessment? There's also another missing piece, the core bedside skill. Removal on total dependence on expensive tools and unnecessary toys, technology. This is an eye patient. What's an eye patient? Eye patient is somebody at the center. It's an icon. It's clothed in binary garments, computer language. Often the emergency room tests everything. So what they do a visual walk around. They don't look at the patient. And this is where the romance of medicine is lost. And this is my last slide to tell you we have wandered far afield and we still haven't thought about bedside skills and examination. We are slowly losing it. This was well highlighted in this article, and I urge those of you who are interested to read this. It gives you a lot of insight, what we have lost in the process the last few years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Raja, for taking us through the journey on why we are where we are now. And I think structure with a structured curriculum, assessment, people, and systems in place sounds like a good thing, but are there any problems to it? Maybe now we'll move on to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Professor Kenneth Mak. You have heard him yesterday. He had just talked about the challenges in transforming the healthcare system locally. Prof. Mak is our chairman, medical board for Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. He is also the senior consultant in the Department of General Surgery. He is an eminent teacher, and he is also still actively involved in the medical education and much sought after by students and trainees for teaching. And he is also the chairman of the Residency Advisory Committee for Surgery. And he is well suited to give the next talk. Let me wear my glasses to read this. Surgical Residency Training, Confronting Wicked Problems, Sacred Cows, and Future Challenges. A rather provocative title. Please welcome Prof. Mak.
Yesterday I talked about national healthcare issues. Today I'm going to take a different view, and today we're just going to be talking about issues related to residency training. I'm going to flesh out further. We've got our poor guy going exercise on the cardio. I'm going to perhaps take the conversation a little bit further from what the Prof. Raja has very nicely done, setting up a little bit of a framework. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sharpen the focus a little bit to talk about some issues that currently some of us are facing within residency programs. But because I am a general surgeon, I chair the General Surgical RAC, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a little bit in relation to that, if only to provide some examples to allow you to appreciate that sometimes what we do has sometimes perverse consequences, and we need to perhaps continually tweak and move on in this journey towards excellence. In this case, excellence in training. General surgical specialty training has evolved over time. In fact, we've had some notion, some people describe our specialty training even before the 1950s. But how we've trained has changed, and the truth is, sometimes training was previously done in name, but not really in a true good way. Even when we morphed and evolved through time into our current residency training structure and format from 2010 onwards, we find that in fact that journey has taken place over time. Such specialties declared in Singapore even predated how we train and how we got our act together in terms of how we want to train people. A very traditional way that we used to train would have been to now define distinct phases to our training. And we, in the past, would define what we describe as a basic training phase, an advanced or higher specialty training phase. The understanding was that what we have in basic training would set up foundational competencies, and then we move on to meat, which is then training in a particular defined specialty in a more advanced way. Over time, historically, the actual journey has changed in terms of our emphasis between basic and advanced from 3 years and 3 to 2 and 4. But in general, for surgical training, it's been something in the order of 6 to 7 years, depending on what specialty you're looking at. We've also had a system of examinations and appraisals that will mark successful completion of each particular phase of our training. We describe the assessment, the summative assessment, the end of basic training as an intermediate exam, and the final assessment at the end of higher training was what we describe as a summative exam. But by and large, historically, even in these days when we were describing this, training was more a form of apprenticeship without a very defined curriculum, as Prof. Raja has alluded to. With residency, it allowed us very great benefits, and therefore it's important to acknowledge that a residency has provided benefits even to the procedural related specialty training programs. Prof. Raja alluded to some of them. I put it down in boxes. We now have dedicated funding that allows for dedication of resources just for training. And the resource allocation has helped our faculty to deliver better teaching. There's now protected time, and protected time occurs on the part of the trainer as well as the trainee to ensure therefore that these training opportunities are provided. Of course, we have better welfare, and unfortunately at this stage, better welfare is biased towards residencies to ensure that they have a better quality of life. But really, it's not just that. It's also for patient safety to ensure that the tired trainee doesn't in fact now get into a situation that compromises patient safety. We have a way to go in having better welfare for the trainers, but perhaps in a future situation that will be one of our end state objectives as well. There is a good and clearly defined curriculum, which in the past we had some sense of, but we're doing a lot of things on instinct in the past, and now with better defined structures, it's helped to ensure that there are deliverables clearly defined for our trainers to help with their trainees. Most of our training now is competency-based, and with appraisals now also linked towards those competency standards with a comprehensive scheme and format for those appraisals. The competencies are predominantly defined by the ACGME, but really they relate, as Prof. Raja has alluded to general competencies that we can all agree with, irrespective of whether we're working in Singapore or working in the States. They are relevant even to the delivery of medicine in Singapore, having these competency standards. And we now have a plethora of institutions. They are still the traditional institutions engaged in training, but it's a better governance structure such that we know now who is supposed to take charge of training of these generation of residents and trainees going through the institutions. We have now a system of 3 residency programs for most of our specialties, with a main training institution designated a sponsoring institution and a secondary institution designated a partnering institution. This is in part related to mass, the amount of resources we can bring to bear, and in general, the sponsoring institutions are the bigger centers or the national centers, the academic medical centers. But in itself, that's given rise to tensions and strains and issues we still need to sort out. current residency program we have for surgery is designated a phase 1 residency because it's the first of a series of residencies to get implemented when we first went down the residency route in 2010. We have a system where traditionally we would only accept doctors into training after they've graduated and after they've spent 1 year at least in housemanship. But with the new residencies, we introduced somewhat controversially, we are also allowed medical students to apply to get into residency. And therefore, you could literally become a resident into specialist training immediately after graduation. And that has had its proponents and opponents. And there are certain issues and observations that are coming out now as we see the current generation of residents move through the system. We moved also into a 5-year residency program, which was again somewhat debatable because the previous legacy program we had was 6 years. And at the initial decision making, it wasn't necessarily based always on evidence-based, but there was a conscious attempt to want to duplicate the American structure. The American residency program was 5 years in duration, and therefore we must strive to go for a 5-year structure as well. Some of our residencies, in fact, had training much shorter or much longer than what actually the Americans do. The Americans, for example, train emergency physicians over 3 years or in some programs up to 4. Our training in Singapore is 5 years in duration. So there was a need, therefore, to ensure that our training standards were not compromised, and therefore for some disciplines, the training became first 5 years or first 3 years credentialed by the Americans, but the subsequent training years was deliberately still retained to ensure that we meet our local training needs. However, for general surgery, we didn't jump on that particular bandwagon. So we in fact shortened the duration of training from 6 years to 5. The core rotations and elective rotations help our trainers to engineer a breadth of training exposure that allows them at least to be competent in most disciplines and be autonomous in being a general surgeon once they graduate. The current residency program, unfortunately, also has this unique situation of having first-year post-graduation residents in our system. We call them PGY1 residents. They have uniquely different challenges compared to those who enter after PGY1. And one unique distinctive is the fact that they still need to complete the requirements for full medical registration under the Medical Registration Act. And this requires them to do mandated medical-related postings. The medical equivalent doctors have to do surgical-related postings as part of that exposure they must do in their first year before they can actually be fully registered. And that has led us to a very interesting situation where the training exposure, therefore, for post-PGY1 entrants and PGY1 entrants is actually different because one group needs to do more medicine than the other. And therefore, the training, in fact, is a little bit different and heterogeneous because of that. We now, in fact, have a system where, as we started, we didn't really actually also start with a big bang. We started with a phased transition where there were people still in the old system as we moved people into the new system. And in fact, if you see with this slide, the last and legacy trainees in the old system don't leave us, in fact, until 1.6 and 1.7. So that means right now, our training system is a hybrid of 2 different systems, the old and the new, which leads to a little bit of messiness now, hopefully that cleaning up post 1.7. However, that journey for some of us has been a somewhat tumultuous one, and I see it, liken it to sometimes traveling along rapids. And it's always a question whether or not we train our residents correctly to be the surgeons of the future. And this is not necessarily a concern only for general surgery. It's starting to be articulated for some of the other surgical-related disciplines as well. And I'm going to show and share with you some wicked problems, not to deal with them in any depth, but only to paint the landscape that maybe there's still room for improvement in how we do things in residency. I liken these to what I call wicked problems. Wicked problems are complex problems. I introduced you to the term complexity yesterday, where the solution is not so evident because sometimes there are multiple variables and factors at play. One wicked problem is how we choose people. And currently we have uniquely a system where we have a heterogeneous group of people with multiple streams which can enter into residency. The traditional would be local doctors after they've completed PGY1, but we now even allow medical students in their final year to apply with no track record, a very difficult ability to determine whether they're actually appropriately suited for the specialty they aspire to. We also have international doctors who, in fact, are allowed to apply for residency even while they currently are still working overseas, but on the understanding that by the time they start their residency, they must be working in Singapore. But again, they come from a variety of different backgrounds with a little better understanding of what they can have done before, but still we have very little opportunities because of the limited time we have to appraise them and evaluate their suitability for our local training. So I liken this to speed dating because while they submit by online application portfolios, the actual process that I have to interact with any particular resident is very limited. They go through multiple stations, each barely 10 minutes in duration. Very difficult, in fact, to assess comprehensively that a person ultimately is suited and matched appropriately into residency. A second wicked problem is in fact a basket of things I regard as post-selection blues. We have also, as a result of selection concerns, a significant attrition rate that's starting to emerge from residency. It's interesting that in the States, for surgical-related residencies, they have an attrition rate of 30% or more, and we have never seen this before in our traditional advanced training programs. We're starting to see an increased attrition rate, and perhaps this is also related to how we select people for residency in Singapore. The PGY entrants have their own unique set of problems, and the shortened training duration and rest hours leads to challenges in terms of ensuring we provide sufficient training opportunities to allow them to attain the competency standards we think they need to complete training. And because we still have a legacy issue of a mix of old and new training systems, that leads to sometimes tensions. We are schizophrenic in combining all things together in the same melting pot, but then causing a lot of tensions when certain forms of assessment don't necessarily apply in the most appropriate way for a particular form of training. To sharpen that and to give you more context, this is an anonymized set of data that is real. It comes out from some of our trainees, and the program directors are telling this to me. In one particular program, and this is data current to mid of this year, in terms of residencies, because of the limited training hours, they're actually finding it difficult to meet, in fact, their training volumes. And it will be an issue because of our shortened training pipeline based on an understanding that we are similar to the States, but the context is that, in fact, our training opportunities and circumstances are very different. This will certainly provide a lot of tension for us as we strive to ensure that the residents we produce are as good as the old trainees. This is another one from another program to show that, in fact, the problem is not only uniquely related to one particular year, but you'll see consistently that R1 residents have difficulty meeting the expected milestones for that particular year. And this is not unexpected because of the limited time they have doing surgical-related training, and all those time taken away for doing medical-related training is good, creates the right foundations for them, but it may not have been desirable to include it within the same 5 years of training that they currently are doing. They also at a very junior level, and the truth is, despite the intent of bringing this into a new era, we still treat many PGY1s as scut monkeys, dealing with menial work, administrative work, which then takes them away from training time. And we have to change the way we have them in the workplace. Another problem really is the fact that our patients are changing, and we're struggling to deal with ramping and revamping a system to meet our expectations of today. We are not necessarily keeping pace with the patients of tomorrow. And we'll need to now figure out how best to be more responsive to dealing with an older population of patients over the years with unique needs that are not necessarily the same as the younger patients of today. All right? The general surgeon will need now to be competent highly in managing functional problems of aging coexisting in their same patients, which may not be their concern today. National needs are something that's always a tension, and Raja alluded to this as well. We are building new hospitals. I showed that little map yesterday at my previous talk, if only to demonstrate that many hospitals are coming online, and we're building new hospitals almost once every 2 to 3 years.
This creates a certain tension in terms of the manpower numbers we need to staff these hospitals, and therefore there's always a pressure for us to want to ramp up our training pipelines. But our current training pipeline is actually defined more based on training capacity. So that provides us with competing priorities, which we must deconflict and allow us to have a compromise in terms of what the benefits are for both the trainers, the trainees, and the larger system and infrastructure in place. There are also competing needs between what the SI and the PI wants, because there are limited people in the system, but many jobs available. So the tendency is for great competition, and currently the partnering institutions are finding they are being left out in the search for available manpower to staff their hospital needs for the future. And attrition, as I mentioned earlier, remains a concern. So some of the changes that are being mulled over to try and deal with some of these wicked problems are also in themselves controversial. There have been some discussion about whether or not now, because of the issues and difficulties of training PGY1s, whether we need to in fact go back into a system of training people at a later stage in their career development, where they're a little bit more sure of what they want to do, perhaps limiting attrition, but at the same time having better opportunities for these people in their training to attain the competencies that they're supposed to have. But if we have to now bring PGY1s into residency, to perhaps now introduce categorical transitional years to meet the non-surgical needs for their career development and foundational, but not therefore still compromise on surgical-related training. There's even some conversation about whether we should now extend the duration of training to 6 years, and perhaps for some individuals even beyond, to assure that the training matches and delivers on ultimately producing the correct surgeon we want. But how much exposure should doctors in training receive in non-core areas and core remains something that is not locked in, and the curriculum over time must morph to meet the future needs that we will have. We need to define what we regard as core, and we need to recognize whether the product of the future still needs to be generalist because of the tension between subspecialty needs, and how we want to also generate team-based residents, team-based surgeons, and team-based biased clinical practice in the future. We also will need to now think about how we want to change the way we assess people. We've been somewhat fixated by old structures, and there will be a need eventually to think about whether we need to give up some of the old to move on to assessments that are more appropriate to the new style residency program. That may include whether or not we still want to have legacy affiliations and alignments, perhaps with royal colleges in the UK, which have historically helped us to develop to where we are, but for our next step in our journey, we may have to deliver on our own method and form of assessment, which is locally biased. The tension includes dealing with training capacity versus manpower needs, generalist versus subspecialty aspirations, and the need for whether we should now talk about even training beyond residency into what we describe sometimes as fellowships. We're beginning to understand that residency is not the end destination for all training for doctors that we want to eventually evolve into becoming specialists. And we may need to now decide what the end of residency actually certifies, whether it's just a base competency still, or whether we're still talking, or we want to talk about someone who is fully accomplished in all areas. So the road is long, and there are decisions we have to make along the way to ensure that we navigate to the correct desired endpoint, but really it's all hands on deck. It's formal partnership of residents, the hospitals, the training providers, the policymakers that will ultimately win the day for our future surgeons in Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mark, for highlighting, despite all the advantages and that we can see in residency, highlighting the challenges that we are facing, that we need to handle and address before we can improve the postgraduate medical education to help the patients in the future. We move on now to future of nursing. And to do that, I would like to just introduce our third speaker. Our third speaker is Ms. Loh Beng Hoi. She is the chairperson for the Singapore Nursing Board, and she's also our Director of Nursing in Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. She has been instrumental and pivotal in the planning of our new hospital when we moved over, and she is also currently very actively involved in the management of the hospital. She has been involved with the nursing in Singapore since, I think, 1985, and so she has seen the changes, how nursing care has evolved over the years, and she is most well-suited to give the next talk, which I will read.
I'll read for you. The
Thank you.
changing role of today's nurses beyond the bedside.
Wonderful. Please join me to invite Ms. Low.
Thank you, Dr. Tavin. Actually, Prof. Raja ended his slide by saying, returning to bedside. And you look at my title, Beyond the Bedside. So what do you think? Are you confused? Actually, for the last 2.5 days, I think the movement beyond bedside, it has been very obvious the last 2.5 days. It is because we are moving patients to the home. And this is where we have to move beyond bedside, okay? So it is very interesting, and I think all of you would have gotten a very good feel of the macro, the meso, and the micro that CMB Kenneth Mark espoused yesterday, okay? So I will not touch anything along that line, and I'll go straight into talking about our changing role of today's nurses. And of course, I just want to say, care to go beyond. I just want to explain, for those of us who are local, it is part of branding nursing for the future as one of our national nursing task force initiative. And mid-January, the drama that was filmed in Khoo Teck Puat will be launched on TV. And it's a 20 series for nursing, okay? And so this is Care to Go Beyond, which cuts across allied health and nursing. And doctors talk about attrition. I think nursing, no difference. Allied health, no difference, because we know the needs are growing so much in Singapore. And definitely, it is a mammoth task ahead of us. So while we transcend in terms of people, place, and time, I think in terms of our outlook, we have, in terms of the way we care, we have, and even our hospitals have all transcended. So from the very physical perspective, we really have moved on. I picked up this old definition of the word nurse from the nursing website, from the nursing site in Singapore. And if you look at the definition, it's for female, okay? That's why we are so lack of male nurses in our setting. And we have, I think, less than 5% of male nurses here in Singapore. We just did a very recent survey. I don't know about Hong Kong, whether you have a lot of male, maybe you can share with us. And then, of course, we all started with hospital setting. And then we are now living the last few years talking a lot about how expensive it is to take care of patients in the hospital setting. So we are part of the big MOH healthcare family. And yesterday you saw all the big strategies they're talking about. And I'm heartened to know that in that committee, nurses, allied health are inclusive, so that at least in the planning of the big picture for Singapore, the other supporting staff are aware of the needs nationally. So here we are, the structure of our big family. And of course, current challenges has been painted again and again is about our aging population. Yesterday, Hong Kong said that their aging population is higher than Singapore. But I was in a seminar not long ago, and they said Singapore is actually behind Japan, so I don't know who is right, Hong Kong or Singapore. But whatever it is, we are living in an aging population. This shot was shared by CMB yesterday, and this was shared to the nursing leaders in the early 2010, when we started our leadership journey together. And so nursing then began to think, what would be our collective responses based on all these that we have to work along with doctors and the national strategies for our patient: accessibility, quality, affordability. And of course, we know the structure of our healthcare ecosystem is going to focus more on health promotion or healthy lifestyle, Then primary care, we still have to develop, even though 80% of our patients are supported by GP and private sector group and only 20% by polyclinics. And then what about acute? 80% at the moment are patients we take care and only 20% outside. So we really need to blur the line and then see how we can work through. And this is a lot about how patients flow through. And then of course, intermediate long-term care hasn't gotten so much focus until the last few years. And we really need to look at that, of course, because of very competing needs. And of course, this is our favorite slide that I think CMB also used yesterday, that we like to describe the 5 types of patient. And why I paint this picture again and again, we use all the time, is basically that we have to go upstream to keep healthy. This is the business that all of us are involved in the hospital. And then the post-illness, we are all beginning to do. Okay, and so this is how it runs across. And what about our current opportunities? Like I mentioned earlier on, we really need to move. And if you look at the opportunity from pre-illness right through to post-illness, actually as a joke, I was just telling some of my nursing administrator, actually I don't need to give this lecture. Why? Because your roles have all been dictated. Where the patient need, where we are straddling from pre-illness, illness and post-illness, you will all have a job to do. And this is where nursing scope and your roles will actually develop and expand. So at the pre-illness state, of course, our health promotion board, if you go on site, you will get a lot of insights of what they do. They run a lot of programs, they do immunizations, the nurses go to the schools, so we try to go upstream and do that. And of course, this is a host of things that they do, and we have to work even closer to them to see how we can integrate more and more with what we do with patients in the hospital and then post-care as well, so that we don't duplicate. So from the illness perspective, we know patients will come through clinic, they'll come through A&E, they'll flow through the wards, operating theatre, ICU, and the ward setting again, if they recover from ICU. And along this picture, we all know that general nurses is the core at the start of your training. After you qualify, you work at the ward base. And sometime along the line, you decide you want to be an A&E nurse, you want to be an operating theatre nurse, you want to be an ICU nurse. And that's where you move into specialty. So your role does evolve out there under the specialty. And the specialty part can go on and on and on, correct? So long as the doctor develops a specialty, there will be always a need for the nurse to support. And that is a good thing in terms of learning depth. And I think one of the participants reminded me 2 years ago, I spoke about the T-shaped nurse and I've forgotten about it. So it's about having breadth in our general training, having depth in your specialty, and then of course later on I'll share how nursing will also change part of our curriculum and how we will have to support the needs of the patient across the sector. So post-illness, your care can be a transitional care nurse, community, telehealth, nursing home, care coordinator, case management. But I like to say that all these are just naming convention. And sometimes the name can mean like you're doing the same job as well. So how we all actually develop that. So over time, it is very important to actually understand our role and how we should integrate and coordinate well, take away duplication. And this is something that even among us nursing here, as we move to the community, it's our challenge. And we have to really know what each other does in our role to be able to connect effectively and to reduce any waste in the system. And we also realize nurses need other skills, like system thinking. I never forgot, when we first had an engineer working with the nurses, he thought, oh no, these nurses, the way they talk, like they go around the world, no? And I really don't know what they're telling me. So he was very polite, because he was an engineer, okay? So you know, engineer is pop, 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 and then no nonsense in between per se. So it is very important for us also as professionals, because we tend to be very focused with what we do. And sometimes we need professionals like them to also start helping us to think system. It's very important because we are painting a lot of our strategy based on systemic views. So it is important to understand where it's coming from. And of course, just now there was a workshop about design thinking that some of you would have attended. And using this is to understand how we should design for human people to use. And then I think we're going to invite somebody who will come and teach us about human factor, meaning how we behave. And then, of course, hospital planning, IT system, and this is where the nurses have to play a very key role in developing the care processes. If you don't play a key role, then whatever is built for you, you have to use it. So it is important to know all these things, and even analytics is on the horizon because data analysis is so key. And without the data to make improvement, we will not be able to make good useful improvement as well. So these are other skills on the horizon that when some nurses are interested, we should also encourage them to move into that level of work. Then, of course, the future recommendations, like I say, the nurses had the collective response. And so in end November 2012, the Chief Nursing Officer, Ms. Pauline Tan, who actually should be taking on this talk this afternoon, unfortunately couldn't do it. Together with our GCO, Mr. Liak, started this National Nursing Task Force. And it has taken us a while. And then we have just started our roadshow this year in August to roll out some of our initiative. And the implementation will take us a few more years to realize some of the impact. And so this is what we have done. Sorry. And of course, the main thing, our team is We Care, and we talk about well-being of nurses and the career structure, the advancing of nursing practice, our role redefinition, and education excellence. And then, of course, you know our GCO is very passionate about the book drive. To all my Hong Kong delegates, I would encourage you to read this book, because when we were doing the hard stuff of what to do for the program, our GCO brought us back to thinking about this book, where it talks a lot about autonomy, whether autonomy for patients, healthcare worker as a team together, talking about mastery, and then more importantly, is the purpose of why we are here, what we are doing, and who are we serving, and what purpose we can do to deliver the value for them. So we took a systematic approach. We look at the professional development. We also look at pay, and the nurses have just gotten their pay rise in October. And then we look at value-added roles and new career paths. And for role redefinition, we're looking from competent, proficient to expert level. But a lot of this role redefinition, we were looking more at the advanced practice nurses. And for the advanced practice nurses who are trained at the master's level, we used to allow them to go straight in and be diabetes nurses, or straight in to be ICU master's level. And we're going to change this and put them under 4 main pockets: acute care, community care, mental health, surgery, and medical care. That's what we're going to do. So they will all now be trained broad-based, like what Prof. Mark mentioned just now about the residency program. You train them to be able to move along settings, meaning we cannot say now, I'm trained ICU, I only stay in the ICU setting. But actually you can move out of ICU and do your work elsewhere, around wherever it is. So we are really moving along that. And that we have to work with NUS, we have to work with NYP and change quite of the curriculum. And this year, even the intern APN nurses have to go through OSCE, like the way we test the doctors for their practicum. And so in summary, we actually look at this 4 big areas, okay? I didn't espouse more, and when we talk about allowing nurses to cross in terms of career development, we are looking at dual role as well. Meaning if a young nurse, we realize after 3-5 years, they are restless, they can move to do something else within the hospital setting, not necessarily remain in the ward forever. And that's where the dual role comes in as well. But of course, the proportionate of how we want it happen has to be determined as well. Education, we hope that we could set up a council, because we realize that our training is not very standardized. And while we have got systems in place, it is still individualized. And then there are students who come from learning institution and we say, oh dear, they're not so well trained and things like that. So there are lots of gaps we still need to plug. And it's not easy because we have 36,000 nurses in Singapore. 75% are trained 3 years, which are the RN, and 2 years are 25%. So it's a big workforce to harmonize and standardize. So a nurse used to say, more to know than one person can, more skills are required than one person can master. So sometimes it seems like that the nurses have got many skills to master because there's so many opportunities. But I think we can only master 2 or 3 and be very good in it, okay? So for the nurses, it will be good to master deeply, go for breath as well, or breath, go for skill, go back for breath. So there's always this T-shape that you can invert many times in your life and just continue to move with time and all the things that are happening around us, because the last few years has been a very busy time in the healthcare. So should solution be a more creative division of responsibility? What new models of care will bring about breakthrough? So the nurses where we work depends a lot whether we shape the models correctly. And if it does, we will all be aligned and we will become more efficient and effective in the way we deliver care. And of course, intangible factors like psychosocial, cultural, religious culture, economic factors will continue to impact us at the bottom, and our medical social worker will be able to tell us a lot of those kind of social problems. So change is not tweaking parts of the system, but the whole system, like what CMB has shared yesterday, and is shift in ways the organization thinks and how we want to operate and how we relate with each other. And this relating with each other, the transdisciplinary team has given us good example yesterday. So trans-professional team is also something that I think Lee Kong Chen is working on as well, where they bring teams of healthcare workers to follow the flow of the patient so that they all work together as a team. And so that is really important, and the shift must be away from problem-solving mode to the desired future of healthcare. And yesterday, some doctors asked Prof. Mark, the picture you paint is very high. How do we relate when we're down on the ground? It's not easy because there's so many levels to reach. But over time, we see the future, we understand where we are, and we hope that the journey ahead of us will somehow become clearer as we tweak our system. Okay, so in conclusion, should the expansion of nursing role be made based on needs of patient, collective goals and value? I think Jason Chia shared a slide, I think I caught a glimpse of it at the outside room, that the needs of the patient is the most important. It shall be our guiding principle in whatever we do. And then, of course, we have to collectively agree with the goals that we set. And ultimately, we must know the value from patient perspective, because cost is something that keep on bugging us at the side. And we really need to find ways how to keep healthcare costs affordable. And so, are there successful, sufficient example of team-based? I think there have been. And but we acknowledge it can be expensive because it's like 6-7 people looking after a patient. Then how can we do it better? Can we do them in a group? I don't know. We have to think about that. And then Kok Yang is the champion here, so we have to look to him for more insights. And then, of course, in the schemes of things from the system view perspective, if the goal is to champion accessible, affordable, quality continuum of care, then what else should be progressively done? So we do need to communicate, and we did say that in this very complex thing, nothing can substitute communication. And we have to keep on talking and get collective wisdom together. So have some answer possibility been found through this forum? I'm sure, because I've heard feedback that many of you have are going home with some thoughts that you probably can do much more. And of course, Prof. Raja said the romance of medicine is disappearing. I'm going to bring the romance of Love Never Dies back to us. And this was a video done by our COO. Some of us from the hospital would have seen this video, but for those of you who are seeing the first time, I'm sure it will reignite why we are in the healthcare together. And so maybe do much more. And I'm just going to play this video for 4 minutes and I'll be ending already. Thank you.
Who knows when love begins? Who knows what makes it start? One day it's simply there, alive inside your heart. It slips into your thoughts, it infiltrates your soul. It takes you by surprise, then seizes full control. Try to deny it and try to protest, but love won't let you go once you've been possessed. Love never dies. Love never falters. Once it has spoken, love is yours. Love never fades. Love never alters. Hearts may get broken. Love endures. Hearts may get broken. Love endures. As soon as you submit, surrender flesh and bone, that love takes on a life much bigger than your own. It uses you at will and drives you to despair and forces you to feel more joy than you can bear. Love gives you pleasure and love brings you pain. And yet when both are gone, love will still remain. Love never dies. Love never falters. Once it has spoken, love is yours. Love never fades. Love never alters. Life may be fleeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Low. To remind us all why we are in this healthcare family. Yeah. Now we've come to the last speaker for this symposium. Let me introduce him. He's Dr. Kevin Yap. Dr. Kevin Yap is a lecturer in the Department of Pharmacy, National University of Singapore. He is a very active and keen researcher with over 50 peer-reviewed publications and 2 chapters in books. And he is also, with his in-depth knowledge in digital media and healthcare innovations, he's well suited to give the next talk. Healthcare in the digital age, a glimpse of the future. Please welcome Dr. Yap.
Right. Thank you for the organizing committee to ask me to give this talk, and I hope to be able to give you, as an ending to this symposium, a broad picture of what digital healthcare is and how, in the hope of digital healthcare, how healthcare will actually move forwards internationally. So, the agenda for my talk, I will first talk a little bit about the emerging model of healthcare, and I'll introduce certain groups of patients who are now in the cyber. I'll give some summaries of what are the digital technologies, some of which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, that have targeted patient care. And I hope to be able to answer this question of whether we will need a new breed of clinician scientists in the digital era. So, I'm sure we all know that information and communication technologies, or ICT, has basically gained popularity among all our healthcare professionals, and the internet and the World Wide Web is now being used by all of us as well as by patients for health, disease, as well as drug-related information. Now, healthcare professionals, we can access information anywhere on the internet to make clinical decisions regarding our patient care. And on the other hand, patients are also becoming very well informed about health-related issues through the internet itself. On top of that, we have all these portable handheld devices, smartphones, tablets, phablets, right? And all these have led to this domain called mHealth or mobile health. So the emerging model of healthcare is possibly the fact that we want a hospital in a home. And we know that the old model of healthcare is now changing towards a new model of care where we now try to focus on long-term conditions, preventative care, as well as continuing care. We want healthcare to be integrated with people's lives, both in the home and communities. And we want a team-based kind of a care for our patients with a shared record system. We want our patients to act as a partner within their care, and we encourage self-care of the patients, right? And lastly, obviously, we are very, very dependent on ICT as well as devices right now. So who are the types of patients right now in this digital age? I'm going to introduce you to 2 types of patients. The first, as I'm sure we are all familiar with and has been talked about throughout the symposium, is the silver tsunami. And this group of patients, we know that they have multiple chronic diseases and comorbidities, and this can possibly lead to polypharmacy in the patients as well. And these patients tend to be very overwhelmed by concerns regarding both their treatment options as well as their diseases. So a number of them have started to go actively online for information, and we have a term to call these patients. These patients are from the silver tsunami and they surf the internet, so we call them the silver surfers, right? So the next group of patients basically belong to the Gen Y group, and we now call them the Generation Cs. Why Cs? They are connected. Connected to what? Connected to devices, connected to the internet. So this group of patients, they use the internet naturally and extensively. They're very internet savvy, and they consume media, socialize, and share experiences like no other age group in the world. So this has led to healthcare being merged with ICT, and a new domain has emerged called digital healthcare. So in short, digital healthcare basically uses ICTs to help address the health problems and challenges that are faced by patients. It's concerned with regards to the development of interconnected health systems, and it is a multidisciplinary domain. As we all know, it involves clinicians, it involves IT expertise, it even involves engineers, right? So digital healthcare technologies have developed and approaches have also been developed which targeted major issues in healthcare, such as the quality of healthcare, innovations in healthcare, productivity, as well as preventative healthcare. So let me share with you these 5 technologies that has been used with regards to patient care. So the first are health IT systems, which I'm sure we are all familiar with. So this table basically shows a summary of the types of health IT systems that are around, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with things like your EMRs, your clinical decision support systems, even your robots and dispensing, barcode technologies, etc. Now, some of the advantages basically is to help improve the quality and convenience of patient care, to increase their participation in their care, as well as to improve the accuracy and diagnosis and health outcomes, to improve the care coordination, as well as to increase practice efficiencies and cost savings. But we also know the other side of health IT systems, which are the disadvantages, and some of it is with regards to the financial issues because of the adoption and implementation of all these systems, training costs of the clinicians, as well as the users, as well as maintenance costs of the systems. There may be a potential of increase in medical errors because of poorly designed systems, poorly designed interfaces, as well as lack of user training. And it can lead to workflow disruptions, and this results in temporary productivity loss because the clinicians and the users have to learn a new system. And lastly, we are also very concerned about privacy and security issues. And recently, with the introduction of the PDPA, this has also raised concerns with regards to all the healthcare organizations and institutions. And some of them have actually implemented audit functions as well as no tolerance policies for people who access the electronic health records of patients. So let me move on next to serious games and social worlds, and I'm sure some of you who have attended the previous talk would also know a little bit about this demographic group. We know that gaming now is popular among adults and children. I'm sure all of us, when we walk around, when we go to work, we take MRTs, you can see everybody playing games on their smartphones, right? So games can target people from all walks of life, not just students or teenagers, but even working adults and even retirees. So healthcare organizations have taken up this challenge. So an example is Bayer, whereby they have developed this glucometer called the Digit Meter, and it basically helps children want to take their their glucometer readings. So what happens is the person or the child would take their readings and they put it into the Nintendo DS system, and it basically awards the child with bonuses as well as game rewards within the game itself. So it encourages the child to actually want to do the glucometer readings. And in fact, gaming systems have also been used for patient care. And an example is the Microsoft Kinect, which I'll show you a short video of how it's being used.
Microsoft Research Asia and Seoul National University have created a research project called Stroke Recovery with Kinect. It's a cost-effective, interactive, home rehabilitation system for motor recovery after a stroke and was built using the Microsoft Kinect for Windows software development kit. Stroke Recovery with Kinect uses the Kinect sensor's three-dimensional camera to capture skeletal movements of the patient performing the therapy. The system interprets the data to measure and evaluate a patient's progress through 3 game-like exercises. The classic box and block test exercise evaluates patients' coordination, gross manual dexterity, and motor skills as they virtually attempt to pick up blocks one by one and put them into a box in a set amount of time. The program displays patients' scores, providing immediate reinforcement of a patient's progression. The second exercise challenges the patient to assume a target pose displayed on the computer monitor and then duplicate the target's position as it moves. The patient receives what is known as a Fugel-Meyer assessment score based on his or her success. The final program is an outer space game that enables patients to exercise their reflex and reaction abilities as they guide a spaceship through space while attempting to avoid oncoming asteroids. The application tracks the stroke patient's hand trajectory and notes variations in movement of the elbow and shoulder.
So this is an example of how the Kinect was being used for stroke recovery, and obviously Kinect is quite popular and is being used in many disciplines right now. However, there are new gaming technologies that are coming up, such as Oculus Rift and Google Glass and all those. So basically, all these gaming technologies can be used to improve patient experiences. And on top of that, gaming is also used right now for healthcare education. So in NUS, I believe the medical school, the nursing school, as well as even the pharmacy school, we're all trying to explore gaming for our students because it helps to minimize the risk of medical errors and complications that we have in real-life patients. And we also help the students to learn the consequences of their mistakes in a safe environment. So let me move on then to the third healthcare technology, which are social media channels. The first, I'm sure we're all familiar with blogs and microblogs such as Twitter. These can be very efficient ways to disseminate health resources with regards to disease, treatment and prevention, and even medication-related problems, as well as medical malpractices. So as an example, this blog is from Blogger. You can go and search online for it. It's called James Project. And basically, this is a blog that is set up by the parents of James, who is this baby. And this baby this is from the US. This baby actually died in a hospital because of the medical errors that was being experienced by this baby. So the parents, in remembrance of him, tried to set up this blog to identify the types of medical errors. And right now, this blog is actually used by both healthcare professionals as well as patients. They access this blog and they do discussions on how medical errors have occurred or what they have seen and how they can actually be prevented. So I encourage you to go and find this blog. In fact, Twitter itself was also used by the US government, the Alexandria Health Department, during the H1N1 pandemic. So what they did was during the H1N1 pandemic, this US Health Department tweeted all the vaccination sites within the state so that all the followers will be able to go to these vaccination sites as soon as possible. And this was very, very helpful. The other social media channel that has been used for healthcare are social networking sites. I'm sure we are all familiar with Facebook, right? But how can it be used for healthcare? Well, it acts as an interactive records base to be able to identify health risk behaviors via your real-time status updates. And it also helps alert clinicians to emergency situations so that they can do rapid interventions. So as an example that I showed here, Facebook actually collaborated with the US National Suicide Prevention Lifeline to come up with this page whereby Facebook users, if they knew somebody who had an intention to commit suicide, they could actually report through this page to the US National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and a counselor would then immediately contact either the person or the friend to try and get in touch with this person to help them with regards to their issues. Media sharing sites, as an example, I put here, YouTube is basically an effective method to communicate risk management and health and public health promotion. And we know that YouTube is one of the largest search engines that people use to search for information as well. So various organizations have tried to come up with their own dedicated channels within YouTube itself, one of which is the World Health Organization, and the US CDC has also come up with their own channel, and they are very, very updated. So the example that I showed here, with the recent Ebola outbreaks, the World Health Organization has shown YouTube videos on how to manage as a healthcare professional and as a person or the family of these people. So I do encourage you to look at all these channels as well. And I'm sure we all know about Wikipedia and wikis. Basically, we can use it as an information resource, and this has actually it actually has the potential to reach a wide audience. So some, I guess, all of us, we use wikis, including all our healthcare students and even patients. So this can be a method for public health promotion. And in fact, there are many, many wikis that have popped up since the start of Wikipedia, such as the first three that I show here. They are basically general wikis on medical information. These three are basically wikis that are disease-specific, for oncology as well as for flu. RxWiki is specific for medications. And right now, there's a third generation wiki called ADEpedia, where you can actually identify the phenotype of adverse drug events based on some information that they put into an algorithm. So next, let me talk a little bit about mHealth technologies. Now, this is a piece of news which I got a few years back, which states that mobile devices will outnumber the world's population in just 4 years. Right? And are we really becoming a planet of the apps? Well, we don't know. But I'm sure all of us, right, we own at least 2 devices. We own either a laptop or a computer, and we own a smartphone or a tablet, right? So if each of us own at least 2 devices, we are already outnumbered. So with regards to mHealth technologies, I'm sure we all know what telehealth is. And in Singapore itself, we are trying to gear towards this area as well. And telehealth basically tries to use technologies to do preventative, promotive, and the curative aspects of healthcare. So in fact, in Singapore, I'm sure you know about the Healthcare 2020 vision. We are also trying to use technology in terms of telehealth, where we may have a national call center, and with in relation, and we combine all this with all the health data that we have, we can hopefully try to manage our patients better. And with the mobile technologies and social media, we have actually combined them. And this allows users to be able to use devices to track their own health statuses and monitor them through their own smartphones. And this is the area of mobile social media. So I'm sure some of you know about the tracking devices. Like, for example, the thing that I wear here actually monitors everything that I do, my activity, how many steps I take, how many hours I sleep, what I eat. So, and all these can actually be input into my smartphone, and I can even see the trend myself, right? And patients actually buy all these. In Singapore, this device called Fitbit is actually very, very popular right now. And one of the most advanced technologies, I'm sure the UK delegates here would be able to talk a little bit about it, is the Proteus Smart Pill for monitoring medication adherence. So basically, this company in the US has developed this pill that contains an edible microchip and a patch which can be detected by a smartphone. So what happens is the patient would take the pill, and once it's taken, the pill will be activated by the stomach fluids, and this will send a signal to the patch. The patch can be pasted either on the stomach or on the arm, and it will decode all this information about the drug and then transmit all this information to the smartphone. And it is clever enough to be able to tell the patient, when the patient has taken, when is the next dose of the patient. And in fact, this pill is already commercialized in the UK, if I'm not wrong. And yeah, it's being used in the UK right now. So the last, which I'm talking about, is data analytics and prediction modeling. We know that healthcare information, they're all stored in various forms, right? So as an example, ECGs, all your summaries and reports, lab results, prescription records, and even other types of health records. So all these data, they exist as multiple trees of human-related data and health-related data. And as a patient walks towards and moves towards different institutions, right? They go to polyclinics, GPs, etc. All these data becomes a diverse forest of information with time. And all these information can be used for patient profiling. And our digital care technologies are then able to combine all these patient-related information with the drugs, the medications, and the diseases into one canopy, and we can use them to try and detect trends for these patients. I'm sure we have heard of this term called big data and big data analytics. Basically, it refers to the tools, processes, and procedures that allow the organization to create, manipulate, and manage very large data sets and storage facilities. So the key thing that big data analytics has, there are three things. First, we need to be able to mine the data. We need to be able to visualize the data, and then we need to train the data through computers in order to do predictions. And that's why we need to collaborate with all our multidisciplines, right? Clinicians, as well as computer scientists, engineers, etc. So the goals of big data basically is to provide evidence and insights so that we can provide the right intervention to the right patient at the right time. We want to be able to provide improved health outcomes through smarter decisions and to provide personalized or individualized care to our patients. So some of the potential sources of big data, I'm sure we are all familiar with the NERA. And we know that NERA is currently being used, but it is not, the data inside is not extensive enough. Within a few years, this data will possibly be more extensive, and with the correct training of the data, we could be able to identify trends with all these data for our patients and patient care. Other potential sources of data include personal health records, which are a little bit different from our electronic health records. These are not integrated with the hospital systems, and they are basically maintained by patients. Because of that, we call them social health networks, of which there are a lot of examples that I've shown here. Some of the more popular ones are Patients Like Me, as well as Microsoft Health Vault. Those of you who are interested in exploring, you can actually go to these websites, Patients Like Me. So these sorts of health records do not only just store data, but the patients can actually chat with other patients who are like them to find out information about their diseases, or even check with other clinicians or seek even second opinions on all these. So, and this has been quite popular in an international basis. One of the newest health records that's available, but is in the research stage, is the Google Glass health record. And Google Glass basically has collaborated to come up with this health record app where the clinicians can actually use it to record consultations with the patients and even to store data with regards to their consultations. So what will healthcare be like in the digital age? So, yes, thank you. I'm going to show this video, and then I'll end with just one or two last slides, all right? So this will give you an idea of what healthcare will be like, hopefully to give you an inspiration. futuristic view of what healthcare will be like in the digital age, but we are actually not very far away from that. You know, things like Google Wallet, PayPal has already been up. It's just another form. So with that, will we need a new breed of clinician scientists? Well, we know that there's a new generation of patients and healthcare professionals. They are the Generation Cs who are tech savvy and internet savvy. And there are various programs that have been developed to cater these people towards interdisciplinary domains. So with that, I would like to end to just say that the digital revolution has come. Healthcare professionals not only can, but they must play a role in embracing and engaging digital technologies to improve clinical practices and patient care. We are adapting and evolving slowly but surely because in the digital age, we need to change our mindsets with the newer generations. We need to change our education. And with all these changing health paradigms, we have to evolve our healthcare roles. And each individual healthcare professional must play their part. So with that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yap. I'd like to thank the audience for all the very interactive, a lot of interesting questions. And so first, I'd like to invite our speakers to the stage, maybe just for 5 minutes or so to answer some questions, because there are quite a number of interesting questions that they have asked. I don't need to do anything, right? I mean, here I don't need to. So the questions I think that we had asked you all to vote for. So we will go according to the list of questions, according to the number of votes. So maybe the first question here with 4 votes, I shall address it to Ms. Low. Do you think nurses should have a program like housemanship that doctors have, where we have rotations in different disciplines to help us in choosing our specialty area?
I think first and foremost, the doctor's role and the nursing role is quite different. The doctors diagnose patients. The nurses will carry out the care and the treatment. Of course, our training, because of the patient care part, I think a lot of our focus it's based on that core competency when we come out of our nurse training. But eventually, you get rotated through. After 6 months, 9 months, there is opportunity for you to go up to your nursing officer or your supervisor and say, I like rotated from surgery to a medical ward or to an orthopedic ward. So I see that as part of rotation as well. And so therefore, only the APN now, probably we are going to tweak a little bit to have a bit of the doctor's modules, and also because there is very much doctor-led in the current setting of Singapore, because we don't have expert advanced practice nurses leading the profession. So the doctors collaborate with us a lot, and they are basically our clinician collaborator in the journey of our advanced practice. And even then, we realize that because patient needs runs from the continuum of care. So therefore, we have to string the nursing curriculum now. Even for our diploma in nursing, we will have to bring it to the advanced stage, where we will focus very much on health assessment, at least for the first 6 months. So that component, you can liken it a little bit like the HOMO training. Then after that, the next 6 months, we will go into specialty area. Like if you choose to go back to work in the ICU, you will then go back 6 months to work in the ICU. So that's how we are looking at how we can support the patient care on the ground. So we will move to advanced kind of clinical practice over time, at least next year, while we work with the nursing institution. I don't know whether I answered the question. I don't know whether the question came from a local nurse or my friends from Hong Kong or other countries. Does that answer you? Is it clear? I think we cannot totally follow exactly the same model because I think our roles are quite complementary. And so for that rotation, I don't understand whether you're asking for rotation like what the house officer do in terms of clerking cases and doing their residency program the way it has been shared this morning. Because a lot of our work for nurses is round the clock at patient bedside. It's a lot of treatment, following up the care part of a patient. So a lot of protecting the person as a patient in terms of their functional needs, in terms of their treatment plan, is really our primary role as nurses. Yes?
Okay, I'll move.
Anybody wants to add on? Nobody? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Lau. So maybe I think you need to think of the answer for the next question with the 9 votes.
Join.
Meanwhile, I'll get somebody else to take another question. Let's see. Maybe can we do maybe I ask Prof. Raja, for the future, oops, it's moved away, but for the future of healthcare professionals, should they be trained as generalists or specialists? If they wish to specialize, who should decide how far into specialization?
Okay, let me attempt the answer to the first part of the question. I'm a strong believer in a T-shaped physician. So we are all trained as doctors before we go to specialty, and we need some reinforcement at some time to maintain the skills of a generalist. But it does not preclude us from doing a subspecialty. So that's breadth and depth. So I do believe you have to start training as a generalist, and then you can move on to a specialty, but you still maintain the general skills. And that may call for reinforcement in training. Okay.
Thanks. And who or what decides how far to go into the...
I think decision is always a two-way process. One should have the passion first. So you must have the interest to go into a specialty. And if you can be encouraged. But once you have the interest, then of course the governing people, the supervisors, can see, do you have the aptitude for it? And that's where a good communication is important between those deciding what you want to do and you deciding what you want to do.
So we'll involve the individual and the needs as well.
Perhaps
Mark?
just add on a few more comments. We deal with different forms of aspirations when we discuss this particular topic. We have the aspirations of a doctor who, by virtue of his expectations and desires, wants perhaps to go and go into subspecialty training at early age as fast as is possible. But we also have the expectations of our patients who want to have very good care and also coordinated care. And one of the dangers of people going completely into subspecialty arenas is that there's a certain tunnel visioning that takes place. And you may have one patient, therefore, in our wards, but now having to involve 4, 5, 6 different doctors or teams simply because we've now gone so far down the road of subspecialty practice that each feels powerless to do anything beyond their immediate area of expertise. Then we have perhaps not done the patient the service and we have now fractured, fragmented, and fissured the healthcare. So I think really in our healthcare system, there are opportunities for peaks of excellence to develop, but we must be very clear that in the chase for those peaks of excellence, we must not do something that inadvertently compromises our ability to deliver good care for our patients. And that's the ability to coordinate care properly and such that the care for a patient is always owned properly. So that can evolve through various different models, but at heart for every model is the need still for basic core functional competencies always to be helmed and maintained tightly. That may be through the role of generalists, or for those who are in subspecialty practice, always retaining basic core functional competencies in a broad breadth of clinical practice. That said, many a times we now move towards putting people into such specialty practice too fast before they're ready for doing so. And that would inadvertently not meet the intent that we want at the system level. So I think there is a role for generalists. I think there's a role for people to meet their deep subspecialty aspirations, but it must be paced correctly.
at the correct time. You must first be a good generalist before you can be a good specialist.
Since you still have the mic, maybe I just ask one more question there. Just now you alluded a little bit to it. Is there a tension between doctors in the traditional BST and the residency? You mentioned there's some hybrid in the surgical posting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some tension, and I think we cannot get away from the fact that when you have two systems in the same ecosystem, there's sometimes tension for competition, for resources, for training opportunities, for time. It takes wisdom, therefore, to decide how best to do this. And we must not, in fact, treat the old-style legacy trainees as dinosaurs or necessary inferior beings. By virtue of doing so, you create a system of upper and lower-class citizens, which is not correct. The challenge, therefore, is for us who are in positions of planning policy or administrating teaching. We need to figure out how best now to embrace the two different groups of people with slightly different needs, yet remain committed towards teaching them and training them to the best of our abilities, so that irrespective of where they are, they will remain, they would be true to the training that they receive and be the specialists that we want them to be in the future. So we're currently in a situation where we are trying to still have a better understanding of how best to do this. Hopefully we get our act together, and therefore we do it right, but not when the last trainee now exits our system in the legacy side.
Thank you very much. So now it's a question for Ms. Low again. So is Singapore healthcare system able to involve family for more bedside care for inpatient so that the nurses can do more other essential nursing care?
Definitely, we should look at that component. I think it goes back to the way we first train and how we care for patients. It's going to be a journey that will take long to reshape and involve them, but certainly we should think about that and how to empower patient family to be part of caregiver in the recovery of the patient. So certainly, but it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy. And we have to change mindset as well and the approach, because in our local context, to love a person is to do everything for a person. So how then do we change that and say, in terms of recovery, good for the person actually should be the main person leading the recovery, and we should be there supporting the patient. So we really do need to rethink this part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the next question is for Dr. Yap. So will technology and its use in training lead to doctors and nurses with less human touch and compassion? What do you think?
Well, I guess the short answer is yes, right?
Oops.
But, okay, dealing with, for my specialty in pharmacy, all right, which I believe is for the different professions as well, there is a problem called digital dehumanization of the practitioner-patient relationship. And this has been identified very prominently in the Caucasian or in the Western setting. In the Asian setting, I guess because of our values, our value system is still not as prominent, but we may get there with the advancement in technology. So although I deal with technology, I also advocate that technology is only an enabler, all right? It can't do all things, and in fact, in the healthcare profession, we still need that human touch. And even though the education system is changing, this human touch cannot be lost, and I guess this has to be inculcated at a young age in our students, and that's why, you know, all this patient-practitioner relationship, counseling, residencies, and all this still needs to carry on. Technology is there to help us solve a problem, which I think one of the questions was also on whether technology is enhancing the skills or enhancing healthcare, something like that, right? So I wouldn't say that it's enhancing, but it's enabling. The core concepts, like what Professor Mark has said, is needed for our healthcare students as well as our healthcare professionals. And if we are able to provide that core and we are able to identify a healthcare problem, we need to see whether there is a technology to be able to suit that gap. And not all technologies are able to suit that gap as well. So we need to be able to identify the types of technologies as well as to see which are the technologies that are most appropriate, because some there may be a few technologies that can address a particular gap itself. So with interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary type of domain, we can work together to find the best solution. The best solution with technology will never be known immediately. There will always be teething problems with technology, and as an advocate for technology, I would also say that you need to get past that teething problem. You don't just, the system is giving us faults, therefore we throw it away and blame the system. We have to try and work as best as we can to adopt the system.
Yes.
And it also works with the culture, because we know that the younger generation is also quite savvy with technology, and we have to be open to that as well. For all you know, they might be the ones who come up with better solutions than us. So we have to be able to guide them and encourage them to embrace this technology age. Yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. I think Prof. Raja is also very into techie stuff. Yeah, can you?
I'm a firm supporter of technology, and the caveat I want to give is that we should be on top of technology, not enslaved to technology. So we make use of technology, and we can still improve the human touch and compassion, because we will know much more about the patient with the technology available to us to give us a better understanding of the patient. So I don't believe technology, it's just that I think we sometimes take it too much for granted, and we become enslaved to technology. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are quite a lot of questions. Thank you. Maybe we can't take so many questions. Maybe just do the last question before I get chased off the stage. How do we get more males? I think someone has asked, and a lot of people have voted. How to get more males into nursing? 5% only now.
Actually, we do see more nurses, male nurses coming into the profession. And certainly we have to work a bit harder, because there are barriers on the ground. Recently, we just got a feedback. A female patient said, "Why is a male nurse taking care of me?" So things as basic as that, we have to be also sensitive. So I guess certain areas in the hospital where the male nurses can add greater value, like trauma, ICU, certainly we can grow that, and MOT as well. So of course it's a challenge, because even the female nurses coming to the workforce in Singapore has dropped over the last year. So not only just thinking about the male, the female as well. So Singapore has a lot of competition, the choices has widened. Many people have many more other types of career to enter into as well. So healthcare as a whole has big challenges. Of course, we welcome any male who wants to be a nurse, of course. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes. Prof. Raja is going to be the first applicant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
That's
to
all
all
right.
speakers.
Thank you.
May I call upon Prof. Tavin to give the speakers, Prof. Raja, Prof. Kennemark, Ms. Loh Beng Huai, and Dr. Kenneth Yap, a token of appreciation.
Prof, you're first. Ladies first, okay. You wanted the ladies first, so I accounted before.
Prof. Raja, please. Dr. Kevin Yap, please. And last but not least, Prof. Mark, please. Thank you, Prof. Tavin.
Thank you. Now comes the exciting moment to announce the winners of the oral and poster competitions. This year, we invited abstracts in 3 categories: quality improvement, clinical research, and basic science.
This year, we actually received an unprecedented number of abstracts, which is more than 170. This is an increase of 60% from the previous AH forums.
I am sure you agree with me that quality improvement should be continuously encouraged, and the effort put forth deserve to be recognized. We'd like to invite none other than our CEO, our Kaizen Sensei, Mrs. Chu Kui Tiang, to give out the prizes.
As we call upon the prize winners, can the prize winners please remain at the side of the stage after you receive the prize so that we can proceed on with a group photo taking after. So I'll start off. The winners of quality improvement competition are as follows. For oral presentation for the Allied Health, third prize goes to Ms. Liu Jiahui from Healthcare Analytics Unit. And she presented on the interactive dashboard for pharmacy cost management. We've got Ms. Liu Jiahui's colleague to collect the prize on her behalf instead. Move on to the second prize. It goes to Ms. Lok Ek Teng from Pharmacy. And she presented on redesigning medication processing and collection flow in outpatient pharmacy. First prize goes to Ms. To Hui Jin from Geriatric Medicine, who presented on factors associated with prolonged hospital length of stay in older patients. We then now present the winner for the top poster for Allied Health. Goes to Mr. Stephen Tsai from Laboratory Medicine, who presented on improvement in specimen management and reducing turnabout time through deployment of real-time dashboard system into a hospital clinical laboratory. Congratulations to our winners.
For oral presentation from nursing, third prize goes to Ms. P. Sivamana. Okay. Ms. P. Sivamana has excused herself from clinical duties, so we shall move on to the second prize. Second prize goes to Ms. Aslina Binti Abdul Jabbar with her paper HPV Education and its Effect on Knowledge and Potential Vaccination Uptake Amongst Teenagers in Singapore. Ms. Aslina Binti Abdul Jabbar. Okay, with her absence, we shall move on to the first prize. First prize goes to Ms. Gwendolyn Sim Yen Jin from SICU B36 with her paper, A Study on Filter Lifespan Between Non-heparin and Citrate Regional Anticoagulation Continuous Renal Replacement Therapy, CRRT. And the winner for top poster from nursing is Miss Serene Lim from Nursing Cardiac Rehab Services. Okay. And her paper, Development Evaluation of the Nurse-led Telephone Follow-up Program in Post-Acute Coronary Syndrome Patients. Congratulations to our proud winners.
I'll now move on to the oral presentation for the physicians and doctors group. The third prize goes to Dr. Anusha Kannan from the anesthesia department. And the topic is on scope of the anesthesiologist, evaluation of airway management practice, and choice of laryngoscope, a prospective single-center study. Second place goes to Dr. Jarentin Chong from Anesthesia Department as well. The topic that she presented on is on analgesia technique in colorectal surgery before and after the introduction of enhanced recovery protocols, a retrospective audit. First prize goes to Dr. Lim Zhi-Ying Vanessa from Endocrinology, and her topic that she presented on was on an institutional audit assessing utility of fine needle aspiration cytology of thyroid nodules. Last but not least, we'll want to present a poster prize. The top poster goes to Dr. Gurley McPente from Geriatric Medicine, and the poster title is Pilot Study of Nursing Home Residents Transfers to the Acute Care Hospital, a Singapore Perspective. Congratulations to all winners, but may we once again gather all the prize winners for this category on the stage right now to take a photo together with Mrs. Chu. Thank you, Mrs. Chu, for giving out the prizes.
Thank you, Mrs. Chu.
Prize winners, can I get you to remain at the bottom of the stage because we'll be having a final group photo at the end with the rest of the final prize presentation.
May we now invite our Chairman Medical Board of Khoo Teck Puat Hospital, Prof. Kenneth Mak, on stage to give away prizes for the winners of clinical research. Prof. Mak, please.
Let us now start with the winners for the clinical research oral presentation for allied health. Second prize goes to Dr. Jian Jun Liu. He presented on the long-term follow-up of cardiovascular outcomes in multi-ethnic Asians with type 2 diabetes. First prize goes to Dr. Angela Mo from Clinical Research Unit. And she presented on association of central obesity with renal function in early onset type 2 diabetes. And the winner for top poster for clinical research for allied health is Ms. Cynthia Lee from Aging in Place program. And her poster, it's How Strong is Our Grip? Comparison of Singapore community dwellers with consolidated norms. We'll move on to the next prize then. Congratulations to all winners.
For clinical research oral presentation for nursing, second prize goes to Miss Sharon Fan. She's an APM from our diabetes center with her paper Prediction and Precision of Blood Glucose Level in People with Diabetes. First prize goes to Miss Si Chang Jun from Renal Center. Her paper, Accuracy of Point of Care Glucometer in Stable Hemodialysis Patients Using Different Blood Samples. And the winner for top poster for nursing clinical research is Miss Catherine Kong from Renal Center with her paper Comparison of Fast Peritoneal Equilibrium Test with Standard Method in Peritoneal Dialysis Patients.
Now I'll go on to talk about the results for the winners for clinical research abstracts for doctors. For oral presentation, second prize goes to Dr. Train Lavarin from Yong Lulin School of Medicine, who presented on serum melatonin levels after a single pre-operative melatonin dose, associations with perioperative anxiety and pain. First prize goes to Dr. Lang T. Ong from Laboratory Medicine, who presented on risk of malignancy in thyroid fine needle aspiration at Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. Finally, the winner for top poster for clinical research for doctor goes to Dr. Edwin Seat. His poster topic is Moderate to Severe Obstructive Sleep Apnea, OSA, a predictor of difficult airway. Congratulations to all winners, and may I once again gather all the prize winners of clinical research up on stage for a group photo. May I invite the prize winners who have just received a prize from Prof. Mark for clinical research up on stage for a group photo, please. Thanks.
Next up, we have prizes for basic science abstracts. For oral presentation, the winners are, third prize goes to Miss Heng Ping Ying from Lab Medicine, and her paper, an evaluation of an improved electrochemiluminescence immunoassay for free thyroxine on Cobas E170 analyzer. And the second prize goes to Miss Kai Woon from CRU. With her paper, phenofibrate treatment is associated with increased pigment epithelium-derived factor PEDF in patients with type 2 diabetes and HepG2 cell. And the first prize goes to Dr. Shu Fen Ang from CRU. With her paper, Genome-Wide Association Study using ethnic-specific exome-centric non-synonymous rare variant microarray for diabetic nephropathy secondary to type 2 diabetes. The winner for top poster for basic science is Miss Grace Chang from Pharmacy. With her paper, genotype-guided warfarin dosing in local patients initiating oral anticoagulant.
May we once again gather all the 4 prize winners from the basic science abstract good up on stage for a group photo with Prof. Mark. So Miss Grace Chang, Miss Heng, Miss Kang, and Dr. Su. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Mark. May we request for you to remain on stage?
We are also giving away consolation prizes to the winners, not in the order of merit. The consolation prize winners are as indicated on the slides, in the next 2 slides. Winners, please remember to collect your consolation prize for your posters at the front of the stage after the forum.
May we also invite Mrs. Chew Kui Tiang to join Prof. Mark up on stage together with all the prize winners from Quality Improvement, Clinical Research, and Basic Science for a final group photo.
May we also invite the 2 chairpersons, Dr. Angela Koh, Ms. Chi Lei Chun, and Ms. Alice Leong up on stage as well, please. May we now invite our chairpersons of Alexandria Health Forum in conjunction with the Alexandria Health Nursing Fest 2014, Dr. Angela Koh, Senior Consultant in General Medicine, and Ms. Alice Leong, Deputy Director of Nursing, to give us a closing speech. Dr. Koh and Ms. Leong, please.
Thank you. Our special guests, distinguished speakers, and wonderful participants, especially those that have traveled far from abroad. I think some of them have left for the airport. And we wish them well and have a safe journey home. Ladies and gentlemen, the Alexandria Health Forum, in conjunction with Nursing Fest 2014, is now drawing to a close. We'd like to take this opportunity to extend our sincere gratitude and appreciation to all of you for your invaluable contributions and active participation in making this event a great success.
We hope that the past 3 days have been fruitful and that you will be able to make the most from the sessions you attended. We had a very packed program. I had to ding the bell a lot of times. And we covered a huge range of topics in keeping with our theme of transcending people, place, and time. I myself have definitely learned many new things that I hope to incorporate into my practice, and I hope that you too have benefited from the experience and expertise of all our speakers.
We are pleased to receive an overwhelming response of more than 170 abstracts within a short period of time from physicians, nursing, and allied health professionals, covering the topics of quality improvement, clinical and basic science research. 100 selected abstracts were published in SMJ, and we have created an online abstract supplement to showcase some of the other abstracts that we could not fit into the SMJ supplement. You may use the QR codes listed in your program booklet to link to the SMJ supplement and our online supplements, abstract supplement. All participants must be complimented on the high quality of the presentations, the amount of work and effort put forth into preparation of the papers and discussing these very important issues for better patient outcomes and promoting innovation. We observed that many had enjoyed the oral and poster presentations, and we hope that you will be able to bring home knowledge and practices that would ultimately benefit the patients.
Once again, we congratulate all the winners and thank all of you for your participation. We hope that more will be inspired in the pursuit of evidence-based practice in delivering healthcare with love, science, and wisdom.
Time flies, and we have come to a close to our event. Special credit goes to our sponsors. Without their support, this event would not take place. We wish them well, on behalf of AHS and the organizing committee, we would also like to express our deep gratitude to Workforce Development Authority, or WDA, for their generous contribution and support.
So, like the Oscar ceremonies, we have to thank a lot of people, but I'm sure I'll forget some, even though we wrote down our speech a long time in advance. But if I forget any of you, please, I apologize in advance. We express our heartfelt gratitude to all the members of the organizing and scientific committees, the Nursing Fest committees and work groups, our event management partners from Dream Solutions Private Limited, our lovely MCs, our support staff, all the staff of KTPH who have extended exceptional hospitality to the delegates and assisted in the organization of this event. We would especially like to thank our session chairpersons, distinguished speakers, and honorable guests, judges, abstract reviewers, for the unrestricted sharing and support in making this forum a success.
But of course, the real measure of the success of this forum and Nursing Fest lies in how it affects you, our dear participants, or more precisely, how it affects the actions we will take after we leave here. We look forward for further building partnerships with you and your organizations in bringing effective, high-quality care and new ways of organizing care for our patients in a challenging healthcare environment. We thank you in advance for your feedback and comments. These will certainly be very useful in helping us understand our participant needs and expectations. In closing, we'd like to thank all of you, and we look forward to seeing you in our next forum in 2016. We wish you all the very best, and for our foreign colleagues, delegates that are still around, we wish you well, hope you enjoyed Singapore, and have a safe trip home. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Dr. Koh and Ms. Leong. We have now come to the end of the Alexandra Health Forum in conjunction with the Alexandra Health Nursing Fest 2014. It has been an enlightening and thought-provoking learning event, and I do believe all of you agree with me. Please remember to hand in your feedback forms in exchange of a memento in the boxes provided outside the auditorium and at the registration area.
We also encourage you to recycle your lanyards at the boxes provided. It is a great pleasure to have all of you with us. We wish you well, and we'll see you in 2016. Thank you.